Hi there and welcome to the continuation of our segment on improving your listening skills, which is part of our business communications program. I'd like to touch on a little bit more about the different levels of listening that exist. As you know now, there are different styles of communicators. We also have the listening process, and we have broken down the listening process into the different non-verbal listening, the body language, and also the verbal communication. And now we're going through listening skills. So active and passive listening are part of the way we listen as well. But there are also 4 different levels of listening. And people typically listen at one of 4 different levels. Each category, each level, requires a particular depth of concentration and sensitivity on the part of the listener. And as you move from the first to the next level, the listener's potential for understanding and trust and effective communication increases. This is very, very true. First of all, there is non-listening. Okay, this is one of the levels, non-listening. And we could say that the non-listener does not really hear the speaker at all. In fact, there is no real effort made to hear the speaker. The non-listener is very passive, is not really perhaps interested in listening. You can recognize a non-listener by the blank stare on his or her face, and you can also recognize them by the fact that they are fidgeting, or they are using gestures, or they're nervous, or they just stare and look totally disinterested. So we have non-listeners in meetings, we have non-listeners in seminars, there are non-listeners everywhere. The non-listener really only wants to do all the talking. They are the kind of person who wants to constantly interrupt. They are the kind of person who always has to have the last word in anything. They're not interested in what anybody else is saying. They're only interested in what they are saying. So they want to dominate the airtime. They might sit down between different speakers or sit down at the meeting table and be fidgeting, but they're not really listening to anything. They only want to hear what they say. So we have the non-listening person. The non-listener is usually considered a know-it-all, considered somebody who already knows everything, so why do you need to tell them anything? They're perceived as actually being very non-understanding and a little bit insensitive, we could say. They're only ready to listen to what they have to say and not what anybody else wants to say. Usually they are not very well liked. People know, you get to know who is like this. You get to know this kind of behavior. And sometimes people just tolerate the non-listener. They realize that there's little they can do about them because they're very self-centered in terms of their own importance. So you find that sometimes you come up against the non-listener. Perhaps it could have been you at some stage. Have you been a non-listener? I hope you're not a non-listener, because in management and indeed being an executive in business, you do need to be a very active listener. So we have non-listeners. Then we have the next level, which is marginal listening. So we have first non-listening. Then we have marginal listening. And marginal listening refers to the fact that you might hear sounds and words, but not actually get the meaning or the intent, and the message of what has been said has not really been caught by you. You heard it, but it didn't really go in here and be deciphered and be analysed. It has just stayed on the surface. And a person who marginally listens just puts things on the surface. They never really risk going deeper into a situation. Marginal listening tries to find noises to have an excuse for not deep deeply listening. They just want to hear what's on the surface. They're not really interested in going further into the problem or further into the issue. A person who listens marginally is just looking for certain things. They're looking for main things, key things, perhaps only data, perhaps just the bottom line, perhaps a set of main ideas. They're not really listening intently for everything. Maybe they don't think that they need to listen for everything. So marginal listening is listening on the surface, listening just for some things. It can be hazardous, however, because quite often there are misunderstandings that can arise as a result of it. In the workplace or in your department or division or wherever you are in your office or your company, this kind of listening is a source of low morale because misunderstandings and errors and problems quite often happen. When we're only listening to the surface of things, it causes great misunderstanding and things are not going to go as well as expected because you're not listening for all the information, all the real information, the deeper part of listening. So this is a problem that can happen with marginal listening. So we have non-listening, where people want to dominate the airtime all the time and not really listen to anything that anybody else has to say. And we have marginal listening, where we're just listening to the surface of things, trying to find ways or having excuses to not really deeply listen to things. This is what marginal listeners do. Then we have what we call evaluative listening. And this kind of listening is where there is much more concentration and attention given at this level. The evaluative listener is actively trying to hear what it is that the speaker is actually saying, the details, the facts that he's trying to convey. He tends to be a very logical listener and is more concentrated about the content rather than the feelings of the actual material or of the speaker. So here he is concentrating at quite a high level. The evaluative listener tends to stay away from the emotions that are attached to a conversation. In some ways he's trying to sort of analyze the message or evaluate the message strictly on the basis of what he hears, what the words are. Totally ignoring that part of the message carried in the speaker's voice or in the speaker's body language and facial expressions. So the evaluative listener is carefully analyzing the words rather than the emotions and the intent of the speaker. The evaluative listener thinks that he or she understands the speaker, but the speaker does not think so. Sometimes the evaluative listener criticizes the speaker, either what they're saying or what they look like or how they appear, etc. So we have the analytical, let's say, listener. And next up we have the active listening level. So we have non-listening, we have marginal listening, we have the evaluative listening, and now we have active listening. And this is unquestionably the most comprehensive and powerful level of listening. The others exist, but this is the most powerful level of listening. And it's one that as a manager and an executive in business that you should improve upon if you have active listening skills. You need to have active listening skills. It can be quite demanding and tiring because it does actually require the deepest level of concentration and attention and mental as well as emotional processing effort. It means that you need to be on the ball. You need to be in tune with what is going on. You need to be watching everything, listening deeply and acting upon it and responding. An active listener refrains from judging the speaker and the speaker's message. Instead, the active listener is focusing on trying to understand that person's point of view. they're trying to look behind what is being said as well as understanding what is being said. Are you an active listener? Do you have these skills? Or are you a marginal listener? Are you a non-listener? Are you an evaluative listener? What are your listening skills like? And which levels do you listen at? Attention in active listening is concentrated on the thoughts and the feelings of the other person as well as the word of the other person, the spoken word. We can say that, as you know, this is a deeper level of listening. And to listen in this way requires the listener to have empathy. I touched on empathic listening before, and this is a real prerequisite for being an effective manager and being a leader in business. To listen in this manner requires the listener to stop their own thoughts, to stop thinking about their own problems that are going on, and to give attention solely to the message and the intent of the speaker. In other words, switch off from your own concerns. Try to switch off and give total dedication to the speaker, the person who's talking to you, the person who has come to you with problems about what's going on in the workplace, etc. This is empathy. This is giving empathic listening. When the listener listens empathically, they are switching off from their own concerns and giving total attention to the concerns of others. It requires the listener also to give some verbal feedback and some non-verbal feedback to the speaker, so the speaker gets an acknowledgement that they have been understood. Quite often, we might be saying, things like this that acknowledge that you are listening to somebody or you've heard them. There are also many other ways that we give feedback in active listening, and we will go through that in a little bit more detail later in the program. So, as you can see, there are 4 different levels of listening. We may switch from one to the other from time to time. Non-listening, though, be careful of that one. Try in your line of business or in your work role to be actively listening most of the time. But you will do evaluative and you will marginally listen. It's a normal process that we switch from one to another from time to time. So I'd like to now step into how we can develop our listening proficiency. There are 6 different skills to develop. If you want to become a better listener, if you want to become more effective in your job and have greater listening skills that improve your communication process, then you need to develop your listening proficiency through 6 different skill sets. And here we call this model to develop your listening skills the CARESS model. CARESS. C for concentrate, A for acknowledge, R for research, E for exercise emotional control, sense the non-verbals, S for sense the non-verbals, and S for structure. So let's take a moment to look at how we can develop our listening proficiency. And we'll go through this step by step of the CARESS model. First part of the CARESS model. C is for concentrate. Focus your attention, and if you find you have trouble focusing your attention, then you've got to start to really apply yourself and pull yourself into this frame of thinking. Focus your attention on the speaker and only on the speaker. This will help you to cut out all the environmental noise going on and help you to receive the message clearly. Sometimes I know that there is noise around us. There is noise around you when you are dealing in meetings and things like that, but you have to be able to handle those barriers, handle those problems of noise. And if you don't, then you are not really applying this CARESS model. You are not really wanting to improve your skills. What I'm saying here is just don't put up with noise that goes on. You can make efforts to stop the noise. You can make efforts to change the noise environment around you or those barriers. So it's up to you to do this. So first of all, in the CARESS model, it is to concentrate. And there are 3 major categories of barriers and noise that exist around us. You know, sometimes we find that there are noises in the room. There are other people talking, for example. You may find that you have chatterboxes sitting next to each other who like to chit-chat whilst you're trying to hold a meeting. You know, you can tell them to stop rather than letting them continue so that the process is not effective. You can tell people to stop talking amongst themselves. Perhaps there are poor acoustics in the room where your voice cannot be heard clearly and you may need microphones, or the noise bounces around the room, so it's a bit disrupting. You can move rooms if this is the case. It could be that you might find that you're uncomfortable in the room, that the layout or the chairs or the table aren't all in the right place. If that's the case, then change it. Make sure that you can remove those barriers. Make sure that you can move things around to be more comfortable. Perhaps the room is cold. Well, work out how you might be able to adjust the air conditioning, or open some windows, or do something to change that noise environment. If the room is hot or cold, you can do that. If there are visitors popping in and out, then why don't you put a sign up on the door saying that you have a meeting in place or in process? Or have your assistant hold visitors and ask them to come back at a later time. There are ways that you can prevent and change these external barriers. Outside traffic? Well, that may not be difficult, may be difficult to change, but perhaps you can change the timing of the meeting you're having, or move to another room where it's a bit quieter. These are all things that are possible. If there's TV going, turn it off, turn it down. Radios, telephones particularly. If there are mobile phones in a meeting, or if you're in a discussion and people's phones are being answered constantly, then you can make moves to change that. So the CARESS model here says concentrate. And in concentration, it means you can help your level of concentration by eliminating these barriers to noise. So insist, for example, at your meetings, that there are no mobile phones turned on, that they leave them outside the room, perhaps, or they put them in a basket in the corner, or they just turn them on silent, and not even vibrate, but just turn them off. You can eliminate those barriers, so make an effort to do that. Now, to improve your concentration, sometimes you might be diverted because of the fact that the speaker has some things about themselves that you lose concentration because of them. Sometimes the dressing style, perhaps, or the accent, the way they speak, may cause you to lose concentration. Or their behaviours, perhaps they have habits where they always say, okay, 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 at the end of every sentence. Actually, I have had this several times. I have been listening to people, and they have punctuated every sentence at the end with okay. Now that is very distracting to a listener, and of course it can disturb your concentration level. How do you switch that off? You just have to blot it out somehow and really focus on the other aspects of the speaker. How do you switch off from looking at someone and watching a disturbing behaviour? Perhaps you just have to know that that is not the main aim of your being there at that seminar, for example, and you just have to switch off. Try not to focus on the actual distractions. Focus back on what is being said. These are barriers, though, and you do have to be aware of them. Some of the things, as I'm going through them, yes, of course, you can change and you can impact. but some perhaps are a little bit more difficult than others. I do know that sometimes when I've been speaking in groups or in focus groups particularly, and somebody has been, for example, clicking a pen, making the clicking noise of a pen as a habit of nervousness or just a normal habit they have, I have just asked them, would they mind stop doing that? Just put the pen on the table if they can't stop, because it does disturb the whole process of concentration for others as well as yourself. Sometimes there are barriers to concentration purely because they are internal things that are happening. Perhaps bad timing, like the times that you close, the times that you have lunch. Sometimes those things create problems to the communication process and people don't concentrate and they know that they're going to have lunch soon and therefore they're thinking about food. So these sorts of things are barriers to concentration. Perhaps you're holding a meeting at the wrong time and people are thinking of going home and therefore they want to leave. So this is another barrier. And these are all things that you can try to change in the way that you set up your meetings or your communications or conversations. It could be too that somebody might be unwell, or somebody might have a lot of problems and be feeling quite upset, or somebody's tired, etc. All of these emotional aspects can come into play as an internal physical barrier, we say, perhaps in a meeting or in a conversation. There are ways that you might be able to eliminate those, but the thing is to be aware that these barriers do crop up, and sometimes they will block your concentration and block the communication process, the listening process. Other things, boredom, internal psychological barriers, we can say, like boredom or past experiences. Perhaps you don't really like the person who's holding the meeting or who's giving the information because you didn't get on well in the past. And so therefore you don't concentrate much on what they're saying. You're not really impressed by them, and therefore you block out things and you don't concentrate. Perhaps you're bored. It could be that you've been through this many, many times, and therefore you are bored. So these factors do come into play, and they do block concentration levels. So just to bear in mind when you're actively listening, concentration in the CARESS model, to improve your listening ability in the CARESS model, concentration is a key factor to improving your skills. Be aware of the barriers that exist, both internal physical, internal psychological, exterior environmental barriers, and barriers that the speaker may throw up at you. Be aware that they do exist and try to find ways to overcome them. I've given you a few suggestions, but the rest is up to you when you actually do come across these barriers. See how you can change them. One example, and I remember a colleague of mine used to always hold meetings late in the day because she felt that that was the best time for her. It suited her schedule. However, she found at all her meetings that most of the staff were just so worn out from all the activities going on earlier in the day that they really had no time to be fresh for the meeting, and therefore their concentration levels were very, very poor. So the idea she came up with was to ban all afternoon meetings because fatigue set in after a certain time of the day. And she made all her meetings early morning meetings, whereas the concentration level was high. Her concentration level was high as well because she hadn't had the whole day of stressful activities, etc., to go through. So she could concentrate, the time was better, and everybody else could concentrate as well. So the meeting was much more successful, and the communication and the listening ability of everyone was far better as well. All of these barriers create distractions, and these prevent really effective communication. You may not think so. You may think they're just little barriers, but they really do impact on people in different ways. If you cannot focus away from those barriers, then you have to act on them and try to eliminate them. Assess whether they are in your control or out of your control. If they are within your control, then go ahead and try to lessen them or eliminate them. If they are out of your control, then see how you can get somebody else to help you eliminate them. That could be a way. You might find that somebody can assist you in your department to eliminate those particular barriers. Try to control and overcome these barriers and then really concentrate. Sometimes, deep breathing helps you focus as well. If you deep breathe, then you become calmer, and when you deep breathe, you begin to focus more totally on something. You move your attention totally into a learning process, and you begin to maintain more eye contact, etc. So in overcoming these barriers, deep breathing also can help you do that. So to sum up, our C part, the concentrate part of the CARESS model, for concentrating, as I said, do some deep breathing. And when you've done that, decide that you actually want to listen attentively. And when you do that, you begin to learn. You open up a learning process. In your mind, mentally paraphrase the information that's coming in and also maintain good eye contact. These techniques can help you focus if you find that you're wandering off or your mind is daydreaming. This is a technique you can develop if you find that that is something you need to improve upon. So the CARESS model and the concentrate section of the CARESS model is very integral to being able to improve your proficiency in listening. Now we come to the A part of the CARESS model. Acknowledge. And when we acknowledge, it means when you acknowledge your speaker, you demonstrate your interest and attention. Acknowledge or affirm. Here you are, by the mere fact that you are affirming and acknowledging somebody, you are encouraging that person. And actually, that helps the speaker send an even clearer message. You can imagine the speaker looking at you and you're listening to them. When you're nodding your head, for example, or giving a slight sort of expression that shows acceptance, then your acknowledgement encourages the speaker. So this means that you have actively listened and you're getting greater, clearer messages because you're helping the speaker send a clearer message through your encouragement. Moving on with the acknowledge part of the CARESS model, it may help you if you just think about how you like to be listened to. You like to have people give you eye contact, and that's a very good thing because you know then that people are connecting. People are actually taking part in the conversation and people are waiting for your words. You also like verbal responses and participation, like asking questions or vocal prompts from the listeners who say, or aha. These sorts of verbal responses or affirmations really help the speaker. They are getting feedback in a way. It's an acknowledgement that their words are being heard. So these verbal responses are very, very important in the listening process. Gestures also. Gestures like smiling, leaning forward with interest, as we looked in the solar model actually, the leaning forward, nodding of the head, for example, sitting directly facing with the speaker, the square on sitting position. All of these gestures and positions are acknowledgement of the speaker, and it shows that you are actively listening to them. It could be also that you like people to ask clarifying questions relating to a point, so they're sure about the message. So that is also a way of actively listening. You may wish to ask the speaker to clarify something, and when they do clarify it, then you are actively listening. You are communicating and getting the stronger, clearer points of the message. So the idea is to start to think about how you like to be listened to, and then that will help you to know how you should be listening. This is the acknowledge part of the CARESS model. So these points can help you to also begin to improve your listening proficiency. Now we come to the R section of the CARESS model, the third part, and R is about research. In order for you to be able to improve your proficiency in listening, gather information about your speaker, about the interests they have, their objectives, why they're there. This will help you understand the message even more. You are doing a bit of research to find out more background information, more details. Ask questions for a more in-depth conversation and respond to the speaker in a way that promotes communication. So you may find that you're having a conversation with your speaker that is actually researching them in a friendly way. You're finding out more information, and this is going to help you ultimately be more in tune with them, and you will listen more actively. You are going to gain greater benefit through understanding them, and therefore your in-depth conversations are going to give you greater value. You will be actively listening, and you'll be benefiting purely by the fact that you've got more information about them and you're open more to what is being said. As a listening skill, research allows you to clarify the messages and to go deeper into the topic. It really is, we can term it as a listening skill in a way. Research tools, asking questions and giving feedback let the communication flow easier. Actually, in some ways, it settles down a process if people are nervous, because it's a little bit of fact-finding, and it gives breathing space to the speaker to be able to just give details that they're very knowledgeable on themselves and the subject. If only the speaker is talking, listeners only listen. And this can create tension and suspicion on the part of the speaker. So skillful research shows and helps the listener to reveal inner feelings, motives, needs and goals and desires. So if you are skillful at finding out information, then you will be able to find out much more about what is going on. And you'll be able to reveal feelings, your objectives, and the goals and desires, etc., of the whole communication process. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Clarify the message through some simple researching of the speaker. So if you wish to eliminate tension and only having the speaker doing all the speaking, then start up to ask and research for information and clarify through questioning. Another technique to the research part of the CARESS model, apart from asking questions, is using empathy statements. And here, empathy, as we have explained before, is a very important skill for senior management and executives. Being able to tune in to how the other person is feeling and thinking and responding in a dedicated way to them. So we have 3 kinds of empathy statements, and I'll take you through them one by one so you gain a closer understanding of them. First up, we have a tentative statement, then we have defining the feeling, And then we have putting the feelings into the situational context. For example, it seems to me you're very frustrated because you can't get the product to work the way you want it to. So here we have ways of saying things in an empathic way that are researching and finding out information about the speaker, about the person who's talking to you. Empathy statements prove that you are giving your attention to that person, and you are, in a way, encouraging that speaker to share feelings. Now here when I use the word speaker, I'm not talking about in a seminar situation or a meeting situation. This is more perhaps on a one-on-one coaching, conversation, communication. So empathy statements encourage people to share their feelings, and it's a good way to get people to open up and to share thoughts with you. You're not bombarding them with questions. How do you feel? What are you doing? What is your decision on that, for example? You are trying to open them up in a different way by saying, perhaps, it seems to me that. So you can lead in with these empathy statements in a very soft way to try to research and try to get the information that you need. Empathy statements give you the opportunity, or give the opportunity to the person you're speaking to, rather, to refine and expand on their message. You're helping them step by step clearly state what they want to say. And this is going to bring about a very positive outcome, especially when you're talking to someone who has issues and concerns. And by actually going through these empathy statements and acknowledging and affirming the speaker's feelings, you're building emotional bonds between them and you. This is very, very important in your interpersonal communication skills and to build relationships. So researching in the CARESS model, using your ability to ask clarifying questions and using your ability to ask empathy statements or provide empathy statements will improve your proficiency in listening. So the CARESS model we have covered. Concentration, C for concentrate, A for acknowledge, and R, as we have just done now, for research. Moving on in the model, we come to E. And E in the CARESS model stands for exercising emotional control. And in listening, this is a very, very important aspect. Sometimes you do have to deal with very highly emotional messages, and you have to be careful of how you respond and how you react when you hear and analyze the message. So, dealing with these messages in a very thoughtful manner and waiting until the full message is received before reacting is very, very important. You have to know how to be able to exercise control over your reactions and your responses. This will make you a very effective listener and improve your communication skills, particularly with your staff and with your peers and your boss, dramatically. So regardless of how provocative or how pushy or how exciting the message is, you must concentrate on understanding it first. Really understand the full content of the message first. Stop yourself, listen, and understand it in entirety in the first step. We can ask what causes an emotional overreaction. It's easy to say to calm yourself and listen fully and understand the message. It's quite easy to say that, isn't it? But can we do it? Can we control ourselves and our reactions to be able to do that? So what causes emotional overreactions? Often the differences in our values, what we believe in, the differences in our attitudes, to who we are listening and you and just who the speaker is, the education, the image, all sorts of things can cause us to overreact. Sometimes the dressing style of the speaker might be too casual or too high-powered, and this may cause you to overreact. It could be the speaker's accent, regional differences and behaviours. It could be that what they're saying is not what you really want to hear and you don't approve of it. For example, loaded words on religion or race or political words, etc., or humour used in the wrong way. These things can cause you to jump or be a bit shocked, and you overreact. Your impulses tell you to say something or express yourself. Quite often, all of these things block also the message of the meaning of the real message. So therefore, you have to sit back and you have to listen intently and calm your emotions and calm your desire to jump and react, so you can actively listen and listen in a very effective way. So exercise emotional control. Exercise it by recognizing that you might be getting annoyed and then redirecting your annoying feeling into positive things. I know for a fact when I hear things and I get a bit worked up about them and I know I'm going to overreact, I know that my heart is beating faster, or sometimes my face might go a little bit red, and I feel that I'm getting upset, or my temperature rises, or I know my pulse is racing. These things are quite normal when we're hearing things and listening to things that we perhaps don't agree with or are causing us some concern, and our natural tendency is to react quickly and overreact to them. So recognize first up that this is happening. Then, once you recognize that it is happening, then try to redirect your reaction. That means by perhaps pausing, trying to visualize calm, perhaps breathing deeply, slowing down your breathing pace, or finding common ground in the conversation, finding ways that you can start to talk to the speaker and come up with common solutions. So redirect that reaction in some way. And when you do this, you are actively listening. When we say pause, it means that you can take deep breaths or count to 10, for example, in order to try to calm down. One technique for doing this is in counting, particularly when you find you're getting a little bit worked up. Instead of counting up to 10, count down from 10. Counting down is also a very effective technique, because then you're not raising your expectations to go up to something, you're bringing yourself down to something. You could start by saying 10, 9, 8, 7, and keep that constant pace maintained and deliberate pace that is soft, and your breathing also will help you calm down. These techniques, of course, we talk about them here and they seem very simple. However, given the moment and given the time when you do become very eager to respond and overreact, it's not so easy to stop yourself and say, I'm going to count down from 10 to 1. But you can do it if you apply yourself and if you begin to recognize that this is an area where you must exercise your emotional control. You can begin to do this. So pause and take this action. Common ground? Try to think about, as I said, what you have in common with the speaker, rather than focusing on what is different. If you feel yourself getting upset, then try to think, okay, now what are the things that we share? What are the things we both agree on? What are the things we are united on? Try to look at that aspect of things, and that will try to prevent you from overreacting. That will redirect your overreaction. That is looking at a positive solution rather than focusing on the negatives. And next up, visualizing calm. Easier said than done, for sure, but you can do it. Visualize, start to think and visualize yourself in the last time that you were feeling relaxed, calm, on top of the world and feeling really great. Construct a mental picture in detail of yourself being very, very calm and very, very professional in a sense, and being able to handle this emotional situation. So pause, try to find common ground, and visualize calm. And when you do this, try to practice these things. Practice them, and when you practice them, they become habits. So when you find yourself listening and you find yourself about to overreact and needing to exercise emotional control, you'll be prepared to be able to handle it in a better way. Of course, this is a step-by-step thing. It takes you to try it first to be able to do it. You have to try. You can't imagine you're going to exercise emotional control. You have to actually implement those techniques. So this is up to you. This is your choice. In the CARESS model, if you wish to improve your proficiency in listening, concentrate, acknowledge, research and use empathic statements, and E, exercise emotional control. Next up, we come to the first S in the CARESS model. S here stands for sensing the non-verbal message. So sensing the non-verbal message means knowing what the speaker is saying with his body language, and through his gestures. Trying to get an understanding of all of this through the vocal, the sounds, and through the visual, the body language, as well as the words being spoken. Of course the words are there, and you are listening in a way, evaluating, or you are actively listening to the words, but also you do need to sense the messages coming through from the body language. This is also a very important part to improve your listening proficiency. Try to understand from this perspective, and remember that non-verbal communication forms the greater part of how we are impacted by communication. What we see, what we can sense from movement, from non-verbal gestures, etc., from the face, the smile, are highly, highly important in listening ability. 90% of a message is carried through visual and vocal channels, as I have said before. Around only 7 to 10% comes through the actual words that are spoken. So body language has a great impact on us. And it's critical that we can learn to recognize all the cues, all the meanings and things that come through nonverbal and vocal messages, both when we receive and also when we are sending messages. So that means not only as a listener, but also when we are communicating and speaking ourselves, our total body language, our vocal messages are also very, very important. And now we come to the second S of the CARESS model. The second S stands for structure. And here it's important that you begin to structure and organize the information as you receive it, here in your mind. This is what you do when you have that time between speaking and hearing speeds. Remember, we have different ways of organizing information in our mind, and our brain is working very, very fast in trying to hear things and also in how we speak and how we send out words and messages. So there is time where we can begin to put things into slots. By organizing the information as we get it, we improve our retention, our memory of it, and of understanding the material itself. So we need to structure the information as it comes between listening and the speaking speeds. This gap time is very, very important to use well. So we have to structure our information in different ways. We index it, we sequence it, and then we compare it. So indexing is taking the actual information, taking mental or written notes of the topic, the key points being discussed, and the reasons and supporting points of the subject. This kind of indexing is made easier by listening for words like, what I want to talk to you today about is. You're listening for the introductions to the main points, for example. Or if somebody says, a supporting point or the first key point is, then that is what you should listen for. Then you know that you can begin to start to index the information. Now you are pulling the information from the speaker and you are beginning to imprint it into your memory. So you're taking mental and written notes of what has been said through indexing. Next, you are going to sequence that information. And you are also listening in order of priority. Sometimes someone will tell you something in which the order is very important, and you are given instructions or directions where the order is crucial. Just like indexing, you need to follow numbers. For example, first or second or third. If you have any doubt or you have any questions about what should come first, second, third or fourth, then you need to check with the speaker and ask them whether you have understood the order of things as they have described them. So you begin to index information, listen for key points, main points, etc. Then you begin to sequence and list in order of priority the points in the subject that is being spoken about. Next, in structure, we begin to compare. That means we are trying to work out what is fact and what is assumption. What is advantage, what is disadvantage. What is a positive, what is a negative. And we are listening for these things so we can compare and evaluate this way. And after indexing and sequencing, we are comparing the main points and trying to discriminate between them. Here, you are listening also for consistency as well. In trying to listen for consistency, you may wish to take notes here that will help you identify pros and cons, negatives, positives, etc. But also you can try to retain in your memory those particular points. This takes practice, of course, and depending on your ability there, you will follow either way. But in the structuring part of the CARESS model, we do have these three areas of indexing, sequencing, and comparing. So in wrapping up and summing up the CARESS model, it's important to note that it can help you. If you follow this model, it can certainly help you along the way to improving the proficiency of your listening skills. Listening, as we know by now, is not only about hearing and listening what comes into you. Listening involves a whole lot of skills. And to be a very good listener means you do need to listen actively. Actively involves having empathic listening as well, and active listening also will mean that you will gain greater bonding between yourself and those to whom you are listening to and those who are speaking to you. As a manager, as indeed an executive in business, sometimes you need to sit back and really look at your own strengths and your own limitations. And I'm suggesting to you now that you sit back and you take a very close look at the CARESS model. Use it as a tool that can help you improve in every area your listening ability. As we saw in the earlier part of this segment, most CEOs are required to have excellent listening skills today. Most managers who are competent definitely need to have good listening skills. Anybody who wants to be successful in business, anybody who wants to really have a great career, does need to improve upon their listening ability. Not only listening to study, but listening to become a great manager and a great business person. I do hope that this model and the information we've shared in this program on listening is really going to be able to help you, and that you will become very effective in your listening skills as you deal with your staff and your peers, your bosses and your customers indeed. Thank you very much for listening.